No sniveling. Bob. Hi, this is Julie, and welcome back to the Sauna Trail podcast. Join us in our adventures as we share the story of how our family discovered the world of Finnish sauna. You might be wondering why anyone would do a podcast dedicated to something as commonplace as sauna. It's like doing a podcast about matches, or gum, or USB cables. Well, if you stick around, you might find out that there's more to sauna than you realized. A few weeks ago, we told the story of the wood burning sauna Facebook group. It was our first opportunity to connect with lots of the sauna enthusiast community online. Today, we tell the story of moving that connection from the digital space to the physical space. One of the earliest members was a guy from Wisconsin named Jeff, who was clearly a huge fan of sauna. He would post about electric saunas, wood burning saunas, barrel saunas, Avanto, which is a hole in the ice, which you can hear about in last week's episode. And he also talked about building his own sauna. He has a mind for the technical and mechanical aspects of sauna, which is partly why we call him Dr. Sauna. Perhaps before we tell you about our experience of meeting Jeff, we should let him tell his story. He wrote this article for the Sauna Digest website. It has a bunch of photos, so you should check it out, but we'll read the text here.
My Sauna Journey by Jeff Pizek. Read by Risto. We bought a lake property in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin in 1998. Two neighbors had saunas right on the shore of the lake. One of our first nights staying there, an older neighbor named Bob invited me over for a sauna. The idea of sitting in a hot room really didn't sound appealing to me, but to be gracious, I accepted his invitation. I went over that evening and stepped into a small, crowded, cedar-lined room, packed with sweaty, old beer-drinking men. Yuck. The heat was intense, and I tried to pretend I was enjoying this strange new way of socializing. Then someone pointed to a large plastic vodka bottle. Want a shot? No thanks, I replied. Beer is fine for me. Then to my shock, whatever was in the plastic bottle was poured all over the rocks of the sauna stove. As hot steam billowed off the stove, it felt like my skin was going to peel off my shoulders, neck, and scalp. They all laughed as I crouched down low. It's just water, they chuckled. No sniveling, sit up straight. Bodies began to bail out of the small wooden room, and I followed quickly, as one by one we dove into the cool fall water of Cedar Lake. I felt the calming rush of endorphins. The soothing buzz continued as we stepped back into the hot sauna. I was hooked. Some of my fondest memories include sauna time with neighbors, friends, and family, especially our neighbor Bob, who became a great friend and sauna buddy. He often showed up at the house, beer in hand, saying, "The sauna's hot." Bob was adamant about not pouring too much water on the rocks. "You trying to kill me?" And also was pretty strict about the 3 times rule. Quit, quit, quit. Another neighbor, Daryl, a Norwegian and a real character, often told his latest Sven and Helga jokes in the sauna. I have a great memory of my dad in the sauna when he was in his 80s, telling his stories and holding court. One year, my oldest brother John and I went into my neighbor Phil's wood-burning sauna around Thanksgiving time. The temp inside was way over 220 Fahrenheit, while outside ice was beginning to form on the shore of the lake. John had never been in a real wood-burning sauna before, let alone an ice-cold water plunge between sauna rounds. He brought some brandy to drink and took a little snort while sitting in the sauna. Being completely fearless, he ran down the pier and dove headfirst into the ice-cold lake. Popping immediately out of the water, his skin lobster red, he screamed, "Holy shit, that's cold!" Bob, Daryl, John, and my dad have all since passed on, but these memories make me smile. Cedar Lake Sauna Build. After about 6 or 7 years of being a perennial guest in one of the neighbors' saunas, I finally decided it was time to build my own. With the help of my father-in-law, who's a professional carpenter, we converted our boathouse into a sauna. We thought the process would take a weekend or two. However, with all hands on deck, including wife and 3 young kids, it took about 2 months of weekends to complete. I decided to install an electric stove for the sake of convenience, as I didn't realize at the time how easy it is to burn wood. I have since used the sauna at Cedar Lake nearly every day that we have spent at our cottage. We have had many friends, guests, relatives, and children's friends who have all enjoyed sauna at Cedar Lake, many for the first time. There have been lots of joyful times when we have had 8 or 10 people jammed in the sauna. I've also enjoyed many solo saunas there as well. We occasionally cut a hole in the ice in winter, which makes for a brisk cool down. The Finnish use the word avanto. The barrel sauna. After years of enjoying our sauna at the lake, I wanted something I could use during the week at home. I thought about building a real sauna, but the task seemed daunting and I was looking for immediate gratification. I looked at various options and finally settled on a barrel sauna from Sauna Guys in Pelkey, Michigan. I ordered a medium 8-foot model with wood-burning stove. They delivered it in short order for a modest charge on Father's Day of 2015. I had an area set up for sauna on our patio on the side of our house. I picked up a 5-foot stock tank from Fleet Farm for my cold plunge. Although we are on Lake Michigan, we're on a bluff, making a cold plunge in the lake impractical. I made a cedar cover for the stock tank, which doubles as a cocktail table and adds to the aesthetic of the galvanized steel tank. I've thoroughly enjoyed the barrel sauna and used it nearly every day since June of 2015. The heat from a wood-burning stove is really nice, and the lolu is incredible. As I've enjoyed the barrel, I began to read more and more about authentic, traditional wood-burning sauna, and found websites like Sauna Times and the Facebook page, The Wood-Burning Sauna Group. Building a wood-burning sauna. I ordered Glenn Auerbach's online ebook on building an authentic sauna and became inspired to do just that. Based on past experience and some good advice in the book, I decided to contract out the rough carpentry to a shed builder. I knew exactly what I wanted for a layout and drew up a plan. I talked with several shed builders and finally decided on using a local company who uses Amish carpenters to build their sheds. I wanted to match our house and use maintenance-free siding, dimensional shingles on the roof, and aluminum soffit and fascia. I'm getting old and hate maintenance. I designed the sauna without a changing room because it is very close to the house and just outside a bathroom up the stairs, and I wanted full views of Lake Michigan from inside the hot room. Also, I have a seating area between the house and the sauna with a deck, cold tub, and outdoor heater that serves as a cool down area in summer and winter as well. I had an old patio door left over from building our lake house that I wanted to use for the door. This would provide a full view of the lake, so the shed was drawn up with a rough opening for the door. I was surprised at the pricing from the contractor, as it was not much more than I had estimated for just the materials alone. I was also surprised at how quickly the shed was constructed and delivered, in only about 3 weeks from the time I had ordered it. And just a note here, I'm going to skip forward a bit. Jeff includes a lot of great build details, but in the interest of time, I'll skip to where he has completed his build. But I do recommend that you check out his full story that has all the information. It took some time to get the big Kuma hot, with the over quarter-inch stick steel construction, fire brick burn chamber, relatively large stove size, 120 pounds of stones, stone walls behind and around the stove, and a good-sized hot room. It takes a little while to get hot. My watch showed about 1 hour to reach 180 degrees Fahrenheit. After an hour and a half, however, we are at over 200 degrees. The room stays hot and very uniformly so. Unlike the barrel sauna, which has much of the heat radiating from the stove, the new sauna gets and stays consistently hot everywhere. Once the room gets to 200 degrees, it just stays there with very little or no feeding of the stove required. If you overfeed the stove, you're looking at 220 degrees plus. When temps are managed between 180 degrees Fahrenheit and 200 degrees, the lolu is intense but not overly harsh. Unlike the barrel, where I have to split wood into smaller pieces to get the stove really hot, I can just throw large chunks of wood into the big Kuma, and it will eat, ingest, and burn them like hell's fire. The Kuma is a behemoth, a monster, a monolith, and well worth the money. The stove draws air from the floor drain below, but I also slightly crack one or both of the windows in varying degrees for added ventilation. The views are awesome and the seating is comfortable. I bought a heat shield that I thought might be needed behind the stove towards the back wall. Surprisingly, I use it on the side facing one of the benches. Although the bench is about 18 inches away from the stove, it gets so hot that no one would be able to sit there. After hanging the heat shield on that side of the stove, the spot stays relatively comfortable for seating. Sitting down in the completed sauna, to say I feel satisfied and proud of my work is an understatement. 2 weeks after completion, I had my first sauna party. My two recent college graduate sons came home to visit. We had a wonderful, relaxing time together in the new sauna, with some good music and good conversation. After all is said and done, isn't that what it's really about? So that's a brief summary of Jeff's sauna journey. A big thank you to him for sharing those stories with us. His post and sauna stories were super inspiring to us. And a few months later, we made plans to attend a Phil Keaggy concert in Wisconsin. So I thought it would be a good idea to see if we could connect with Jeff. I reached out to him and he enthusiastically offered to host us at his sauna. And not just his wood burning sauna, but his electric sauna at the lake. And he also extended the invite for us to crash at his house overnight. What did you think about that, hun?
Well, I thought it was really generous of him, but also weird because I don't know. It's a stranger on the internet, and we've only interacted with him online. We'd never met him. We didn't know anything about him, and then the idea of like staying at his house was kind of weird. And then I think this is the first time that I would have sounded with somebody outside of the family.
Yeah, probably had just been a kind of a little insular family journey so far.
Yeah. So I think I was a little nervous just sounding with somebody at his house. So I thought maybe I'll sauna, maybe I won't. We would just kind of see maybe when we got there and met him.
Yeah, and I think that's the way we were initially leaning. He'd said his wife and his daughter were going to be gone, so he basically had the house free. That's why he invited us over. Our initial plan was for me to sauna with Jeff, and I think you were not going to.
Yeah. I think that sounds familiar.
So we decided we would go ahead and take him up on his offer, and then we made sure that my family had the location where we were going
Yeah.
and know where we would be in case we didn't turn up back home.
I think we left his address written, with the kids and all that stuff. But I think too, at some point when we were making final plans and stuff, we told him it was a Phil Keaggy concert, and he goes, "Oh, are you Christians?" And we said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, okay." And then I think later on he said, "My wife feels better now knowing that you guys are Christians too."
Yeah, so maybe he was a little bit nervous as well. Phil Keaggy, for those of you who don't know, he was a rocker way back in the day in the 60s and 70s, I think, and he became a Christian. So that's why Jeff had asked that.
Yeah. So I think when we made that connection, we all felt a little bit more comfortable, but I still wasn't sure if I was going to sauna.
So we drove over to Wisconsin and arrived at Jeff's place, and he has a wood burning at his house, so that was the first sauna we used. I think it was that afternoon, evening.
Yeah, it was the evening. I remember it was dark.
Yeah, I think it was dark when we were done, but when we started, it was still a little bit light. And so he was heating it up, and he did such a great job of hosting. And he had like these heaters that would keep us kind of warm outside where we were sitting. And in fact, one of those heaters, I think, got a little too close to the house and melted the siding a bit.
Yeah, it did, and I think he was so focused on being a good host for us that I don't think he realized what was going on, and so I felt a little bad, but I think he got it fixed.
Yeah, and Jeff is really good at fixing things. It was nice and hot in the sauna, and he had a cold plunge. What else do you remember about using his sauna?
With the cold plunge, I think this was the first time where I think Jeff encouraged us to stay longer in the cold plunge. This was the first time that I stayed and sat and just really chilled out. And I just remember the sauna being so hot and the water being so cold. Like I remember getting the spins and just sitting in the chair there on his deck and then being able to feel the heat from the heaters that he had on the deck. It was very nice and relaxing. And again, Jeff was just such a great host.
Yeah, and I think he had either some old country or some jazz music playing, and that was pretty nice too.
Wasn't loud because I don't really like music in the sauna, but it was soft and pleasant.
And I don't know if there was some question about what heat the sauna should be or whether or not to have music. And we told him just sauna how you sauna. And this has kind of been a common theme when we go to sauna with people. It's not so much us assessing or you doing it our way. It's an opportunity for us to learn how you sauna and then to take some of those things and incorporate it into our practice. So I always want to sauna the way other people do it.
Yeah, it's just a good way for us to learn and to see different ways of doing it.
And then the next morning afterwards, we went to their lake house sauna. And this was an electric, but it was also on the shore of the lake. What do you remember about that sauna?
I really liked jumping into the lake. It had a dock, and so we heated up and then we'd jump off the end of the dock. And I remember it was a sunny day and just sitting on that dock and being in the sun. And it was really nice and very pleasant. This might have been like the first electric heater I'd used that wasn't a hotel or gym. The other saunas that we had used once we'd been on this journey had been wood burning. And so I wasn't sure what to expect with this electric, but it got hotter and it was much nicer than like the hotel and the gym ones, you know. So then going out and jumping into the lake felt really nice.
Yeah, this was an excellent electric setup.
Hmm.
And I remember sitting on the dock or laying on the dock in the sunshine. It's just a great setup.
Yeah. I think there's a few saunas on that lake.
Yep. A bunch of the neighbors there have saunas, and Jeff took us to see them, and we took some pictures. So you can see right now on the screen, if you're watching the video, some of the inside of his neighbor's saunas. And it's kind of fun that they all have these saunas right beside each other. They have a cool little culture going. So this is where Jeff had first been introduced to sauna at Bob's Sauna, if you remember. So after that, we drove up to Green Bay and went to the concert. Is there anything specific you remember about the concert?
Really? I mean, it was fun. I think neither you or I are big concert people. So I think in my lifetime I've only gone to like 4, maybe 5 concerts and this was one of them. So but I enjoyed being with you and traveling with you and going to hang out and having a little getaway.
Yeah, I am more of a concert person. It just has to be the right band.
Ah, I see. I see.
So just kind of a recap, a few things that we learned from visiting Jeff and using his saunas from Dr. Sauna were to hang out in the cold plunge a little longer, not to rush away from it, and to find an appreciation for some chill music to go along with the sauna. Also, just how to be a wonderful host and ambassador for sauna. And Jeff has certainly done that.
Yeah, I think just the fact that he invited random strangers on the internet to his house to sauna was very generous. You know, I think maybe he's more used to inviting people to sauna, and we just hadn't been experiencing that yet before. And so, thank you, Jeff, for inviting us and hosting us. And it was really a wonderful experience.
Yeah, and then one last thing that I learned is just how each sauna group, when you have a little community of saunas like Jeff had at his lake house, how they develop their own customs with the
Mhm.
plastic vodka bottle that they use to make the steam or eating the pickles between the rounds. I love those little kind of textured customs that they come up with.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today as we shared about connecting with the sauna community in person. And thank you to Jeff for being such a wonderful sauna host. We're headed into the holiday season and we're actually going to be on the road quite a bit. So we won't have any episodes the next few weeks, but we will return after the new year with stories of sauna adventures, like laying down in an ice cold river in Vermont after sauna, or using an excellent Russian banya in Canada, and we'll tell the story of finally getting our own sauna. And it relates to this episode. So stay tuned for all of that. Remember, this podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and other streaming platforms, as well as our website, thesaunatrail.com. New episodes release on Saturdays, which is the traditional Finnish day for sauna, also called saunapäivä. We hope to see you again in a few weeks on the Sauna Trail.